This is a Fox News alert. I'm John Roberts in Washington. We have breaking news tonight about the House Intelligence Committee investigation into Russia collusion allegations. This comes as the plot thickens in the special counsel's separate probe. Here to give us an update is the top Republican working the House panel investigation, Texas Congressman Mike Conaway. So, Congressman, you are ending the interview phase here of the House Intelligence Committee investigation into Russia's meddling in the election. You've got a draft report out tonight that you're going to give the Democrats tomorrow. Give us the headline. What did you find?
Well, the headlines are that we've reached that point where we've interviewed all the folks we need to. We've looked at some 300,000 documents, 73 interviews that we've done across the course of the state, trying to answer the 4 questions that were originally set out for a committee to answer. Yes, the Russians tried to interfere with our election process. Yes, they had cyber attacks, active measures going on. We could find no evidence of collusion between either campaign and the Russians. And we also have some recommendations, we'll have recommendations that speak to what we do with elections going forward, how important it is for Americans to be on guard on a process that's sacred to our democracy, our representative republic, quite frankly, and that is the electing of leadership across this country.
But on the big piece of the puzzle that everybody has been talking about, which is one of the reasons why your investigation was struck in the first place, no collusion that you found.
No evidence.
No evidence of collusion between
right.
the Trump campaign and the Russians,
or the Clinton campaign.
How confident are you of that?
Well, we've found none, and so you never know what you never know. But we found no reason to think that there's something we're missing in this regard. We've talked to everybody we believe we need to talk to, and every congressional investigation has always got a caveat that 10 years from now some private diary might be found that leads to a different conclusion. But we'll address that as a part of our ongoing, constant oversight responsibilities. Putin's not going anywhere, so the Intel Committee has ongoing oversight responsibilities that we will continue. But with respect to answering these 4 questions, we believe we've got the information necessary to answer those for the American people.
Now, the president has been repeatedly tweeting that if there was collusion, it was on the side of the Clinton campaign with the Russians. So, again, you found no evidence of that either.
None direct. Obviously, the Steele dossier, Steele is a British citizen. He talked to some level of Russians, third, fourth, fifth, sixth hand, whatever it is that was done. He was paid by the DNC and the Hillary Clinton committee. We don't believe there was any direct information provided to the DNC or to Hillary's campaign that it was a British citizen that was actually feeding this information in. That may speak to one of our recommendations, and that is campaign finance disclosures probably ought to be a little more fulsome than they currently are. Shouldn't be able to hide those kinds of activities behind a lawyer's bill that simply says legal fees associated with research or legal fees associated with compliance. So there will be some recommendations that we think that will speak to maybe fuller disclosures as to where money gets spent.
Over the course of the investigation, Congressman, which has been running now for 14 months, you talked with 10 people on the Trump side of the fence. You talked with 10 people on the Clinton side of the fence. I guess the only person that you didn't get a chance to talk to was Paul Manafort because he was indicted before you got a chance to bring him before the committee. Based upon the number of people that you have talked to, the number of documents that you have looked at, and the interim conclusion that you have come to based on the evidence at hand, do you think that the Mueller investigation could possibly find anything different than you did when it comes to collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia?
So, John, I don't want to go there. We're not having anything to do whatsoever with the Mueller investigation. He's got separate tools, separate authorities, and everything else. And I hope he does a terrific job of whatever it is he's doing. But we didn't find any evidence of collusion, and I don't know that he will either.
Do you believe that you have all the information?
We've got everything we're going to get with respect to Manafort. We had scheduled him early on, and then a deference to my colleague Adam, we decided that we decided it was premature. We put off that interview, and then he gets indicted, and it is beyond our reach at that point in time. But yes, we believe we've got the information necessary to support the conclusions we've come to.
One thing that you talk about is leaks of information from the intelligence community, saying you talk about problematic contacts between senior intelligence community officials and the media. Do you think this rises to the level of criminality?
Well, we don't have the reach to be able to say that. Certainly, leaks of classified information are criminal events. If we had found something that we knew directly was criminal, we would be able to make a criminal referral in that regard. We were hopeful that the Trump administration is much more aggressive in going after leaks because it is corrosive to our ability to do what we need to do. It can be dangerous. It can get people. I know this sounds a bit melodramatic, but leaks can get people killed. Folks that are working in our our behalf in really dangerous spots of the world, we put them at risk when we give out information that shouldn't be released. And so we believe there was contact. We've got one specific person that will show in the report that will go out that makes that comment.
There are some Democrats who are not happy with the fact that the House Intelligence Committee is wrapping up its investigation. One of them is a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Chris Coons. Let's play for you what he said recently.
The Senate Intelligence Committee, as you just recognized, continues to make solid progress, and the special counsel Robert Mueller continues to make significant progress. I find those both encouraging, but the Senate Judiciary Committee really has the jurisdiction over the firing of the FBI director, over obstruction of justice, so we should be farther along than we are, and it is truly disappointing that the House Intelligence Committee is just hanging up its cleats, having not really run the race.
Hanging up your cleats, having not really run the race. Your response?
I just, disagree with my colleague. He doesn't have a clue what we've done. He's not been a part of any of our investigations. So for him to make that kind of a comment is a bit uninformed at best. But we're going to be continuing at this point, working with our colleagues across the aisle to get a report draft, to get their information in there that they want to get a report out to the American people.
The ranking member, your colleague Adam Schiff, has complained long and loud about a number of people from either the Trump campaign or the Trump White House, current or former, not answering questions, claiming privilege. Did you lose anything by not being able to have those questions answered? We don't believe so. Through the interviews I sat through and those folks, we believe we got the information that was relevant to the 4 questions that we're trying to answer, and so we'll go with it. Now, it's not surprising that folks would disagree who wanted to continue this investigation. There may be some on the Democratic side that never want this to come to a conclusion because they sense it has some sort of an advantage to them to keep this wound open. We believe it's important to move forward. We've got elections coming up. The primary season's already started, and we've got important things to discuss with the American people about protecting our elected process. Congressman Conaway, thanks for coming in and sharing the findings.
John, thank you. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
And this is another Fox News alert. There appears to be a serial bomber on the loose in Austin, Texas. Police report 2 package bombings today. One of them killed a teenager and the other badly wounded an elderly woman. This follows another fatal bombing 10 days ago. Fox's Hillary Vaughn is in the Texas Capitol tonight. Hello, Hillary.
Hi, John. Well, police say they do not know who this bomber is targeting or how these bombs are showing up on people's doorsteps. But what they do know, the person building these bombs is highly skilled, discreet, and deadly.
These explosions are obviously powerful enough. You all saw what happened at the initial incident 10 days ago, that it caused significant damage to that front porch area, and there was significant damage done this morning as well. There is a certain level of skill that is required to put a device like this together successfully, and then to have it detonate in the manner in which these are, and to cause the significant injuries and death that they have.
I talked with a woman who lives 4 doors down from the last blast. She says when the bomb went off, her house shook and her body shook. Chief Brian Manley says they are working closely with the ATF and the FBI. Right now, agents are analyzing the chemical composition, trying to trace the explosives. Police say all 3 bombs showed up in average-sized boxes, but police believe they were never handled by any official mail service like FedEx, UPS, or the U.S. Postal Service. Chief Manley says it is still a mystery how the bomb maker was able to stabilize the package during the delivery and drop-off, but craft an explosive so sensitive it could detonate simply by moving the box or opening it. Police say they have no leads at this time, but Texas Governor Greg Abbott offering a $15,000 reward to any tips that lead police to the person behind these deadly blasts. John?
Very troubling what's going on in Texas today. Thanks very much, Hillary. The center of the political universe tonight is Western Pennsylvania. That is the latest battleground in the fight over the House of Representatives and ultimately control of Congress. Democrats are trying to steal a seat away from the Republicans. The GOP is struggling to hold on to a spot in a district that President Trump won handily in 2016. Correspondent Molly Line is in Carnegie, Pennsylvania tonight. Good evening, Molly.
Good evening, John. Both parties are invested very heavily in this race, but the GOP is taking an all-hands-on-deck approach in an attempt to hold this coveted seat. And with just a few hours left to go, the Trump family is sending in one of its own. Republicans are pouring out the sugar in Pennsylvania, from Donald Trump Jr. making a stop at Sarah's Candies in Canonsburg today.
I'm excited to have someone in there actually helping fight with my father for these things against some of these obstructionists on the other side.
To the presidential family patriarch filling an airport hangar outside Pittsburgh over the weekend.
We need our Congressman Saccone. We have to have him.
State Rep Rick Saccone has the full-throated backing of party and president.
If President Trump's in your corner, how can you lose?
In a district the president won by nearly 20 points, Saccone should have the edge. But Democrat Connor Lamb has sought to avoid alienating Trump's faithful. He is pro-gun, and here in Steel Country, he's expressed support for the president's new tariffs. Former VP Joe Biden stumped for the Marine Corps veteran last week. Lamb has earned union support from carpenters to coal miners, and at a rally on Sunday, he vowed to push back against Republicans on Social Security and Medicare.
I do not believe, as Paul Ryan does, that these are entitlements or another form of welfare, as he likes to call it.
And while he's worked to distance himself from Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, the president has dubbed him
Lamb the Sham, right? Lamb the Sham. He's trying to act like a Republican, so he won't give me one vote.
Locally, the race is impossible to ignore, with ads blanketing the airwaves.
Saccone knows how to keep us safe.
Connor Lamb is running for Congress.
At Bob's Diner in Carnegie, waitress Jody Kelly says she's voting
Connor Lamb. It's about education, just health care, which when you're in this profession, you need better health care than what we have now.
But a third-generation coal miner tells us he's behind Saccone.
Because we need more conservatives in Washington to support Trump and help him get his agenda through.
Nationally, this race is being watched very closely with an eye towards the midterms. The looming question, of course, is a potential Saccone loss and what that could potentially mean for the president's prowess going forward. The voters hit the polls tomorrow. John?
Something the president doesn't even want to think about. Thanks very much, Molly Line, for us tonight in Carnegie, Pennsylvania. Let's get some context on the Pennsylvania race and its national implications. Senior political analyst Bret Hume joins us tonight. Bret, this is a district that's not even going to exist next year, but it's all about bragging rights tomorrow night.
Nationally, the contest.
Well, it's interesting that there's so much being spent to fill briefly a congressional seat that's about to go away because the Pennsylvania Supreme Court threw out the districting plan that had been drawn up by the legislature and replaced it with one that basically makes this one go away. So what we have is a special election to fill out that unexpired term in the seat that won't be there anymore, and all kinds of money and effort are being put into it. This is an interesting. The cross currents, John, in this race are almost too numerous to count. In addition to the fact that it's a district that's about to disappear, it has been a majority Democrat district, which the Republican member has held for 6 or 7 terms or longer. In addition, of course, that Republican Tim Murphy was excused himself from Congress after a sex scandal, which generally bodes well for the predecessor of the successor, of the same party. And not to mention the Democrats have come up with a pretty intriguing candidate, young, attractive, telegenic, Marine veteran, and so on. So the ingredients are here that this could certainly go either way.
2016, Bret, the president won this district by almost 20 points. The fact that this race is even close, the people aren't just expecting the Republican to walk away with it. What does that say either about the state of the Republican Party, the candidate, or the president?
Well, it says a couple of things to me, anyway. One of them is that this tremendous antipathy toward Donald Trump among Democrats means that Democrats are motivated, as they would not normally be in an election like this, to come out and vote. This is a way to register your objections to Donald Trump. In addition to that, of course, as I mentioned, the Democratic candidate is kind of cute, and the Republican candidate is kind of a frumpy guy, and that adds into the mix. So but I don't think though that in a race like this with so many cross currents for an election that's going to be repeated basically come the fall, that you can draw all that many conclusions from it. But I guarantee you this. If the Democrats win this seat, they will claim that they've got the momentum for a huge blue wave in the fall. And if the Republicans manage to hold the seat, what with the president having come in there over the weekend and campaign for this Republican candidate, you're going to hear Mr. Trump saying that it was a big win for him.
In your long storied career of political analysis, I've never heard you say, and he's kind of cute.
Well, that's what you want in a candidate, John. You wanted to be pretty cute.
Bret Hume for us tonight. Bret, thanks so much. President Trump is under fire tonight for apparently backing off his support of raising the minimum purchase age for some firearms. Correspondent Kevin Corke is at the White House tonight to tell us what has changed.
I'm saying that the president is pushing forward on things that we know have broad-based support and that we can immediately get done.
Call it the art of the possible. The president's plan to improve school safety in the wake of the Parkland, Florida shooting falls well short, his critics say, of his own rhetoric.
Now, this is not a popular thing to say in terms of the NRA, but I'm saying it anyway. I'm going to just have to say it. Think of it. You can buy a handgun. You can't buy one. And you have to wait till you're 21. But you can buy the kind of weapon used in the school shooting at 18. I think it's something you have to think about.
What the White House is thinking about is studying raising the age to buy long guns to 21, auditing the FBI tip line, establishing rigorous firearms training for qualified teachers, and expanding mental health programs. But no mention of raising the age to buy weapons like the AR-15, for example. White House officials call the plan a much-needed first step.
We're looking at the best way forward to push these other things through, whether it's on a state level, whether it's on a federal level.
The White House effort to treat school safety the same way as banks and airports will be studied by a federal commission headed by Education Secretary Betsy DeVos.
Everything is on the table, and part of the job of this commission will be to study that and see if that is advanced ultimately as a recommendation in next steps.
The president said as much on Twitter, noting things are moving rapidly on this, but not much political support, to put it mildly. But California Congressman Adam Schiff strongly disagreed, tweeting, "Actually, Mr. President, there's overwhelming political support for gun safety reform, including age limits, universal background checks, and an assault weapon ban. Like you said, too many Republicans are scared of the NRA, including, plainly, you." Schiff's sarcastic tweet, part of a barrage of criticism aimed at the president and the White House for not doing more. Politics once again. Meanwhile, John, the White House is calling on states to pass so-called RPOs. Those are those risk protection orders. What they do is they allow law enforcement to remove the firearms from individuals who previously demonstrated they are a danger to themselves or others. It would also keep them, by the way, from purchasing new firearms. John?
Kevin Corke tonight at the White House. Thanks, Kevin. See you tomorrow. Adult film star Stormy Daniels is offering to return the $130,000 of hush money that she received from President Trump's attorney, Michael Cohen. Daniels wants to be able to speak freely about her encounter with Mr. Trump back in 2006. Her attorney has issued a deadline of noon tomorrow for a decision. The White House has repeatedly denied that the president had any kind of relationship with the actress. Up next, President Trump backs off one of his key gun control proposals, as Kevin pointed out. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 5 in New York with the investigation into last night's fatal helicopter crash into the East River. All 5 passengers aboard were killed. The pilot escaped. He is heard in an emergency radio transmission saying the chopper had engine failure. Fox 25 in Boston, as the region prepares for its 3rd major winter storm in as many weeks, forecasters say Boston could get a foot of snow. There are concerns over more wind damage, power outages, and poor visibility on the roads. The Red Cross is bringing in resources from out of state and preparing to open new shelters. And this is a live look tonight at Denver from Fox 31. One of the biggest stories there tonight. The sheriff calls for an investigation after an illegal immigrant accused in a fatal hit and run bonds out of jail and avoids federal agents. ICE officials put a hold on the suspect last week, but by the time they were notified he was being released on Saturday, the suspect was already gone. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back. There is something of an insurrection tonight among Republican lawmakers over President Trump's order to impose new tariffs on steel and aluminum imports. Our chief congressional correspondent, Mike Emanuel, tells us just who is behind the effort.
Tariffs are awful. But tariffs married to uncertainty is probably even worse.
Arizona Senator Jeff Flake is just one of several Republican senators preparing legislation to derail President Trump's plan for new tariffs on steel and aluminum.
This is a counterproductive, as well as result in retaliatory actions by our trade partners. And again, it just injects uncertainty into an economy that was really doing quite well.
It won't be easy, though. The president's acting under authority to restrict imports through tariffs for national security reasons and can do so without congressional approval. And that's assuming Congress can even get a majority to vote for blocking the president.
I do not think that would even pass. You'd have to have both committees, the House and the Senate, pass it. If it gets vetoed by the president, it'd have to be override. I don't think that's going to happen.
Part of House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy's pessimism may be based on numbers. Overriding a presidential veto would require the support of 67 senators and 290 House members. And this isn't a partisan issue. Several Democrats, like Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren, support Mr. Trump's tariffs.
I was very glad to see what the president had done. We have negotiated one deal after another that has been great for big multinational corporations and been lousy for American workers.
With this being an election year, it would seem highly unlikely that Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and Speaker Paul Ryan would take on the president. So the only hope for GOP lawmakers may be trying to convince the White House to fine-tune the tariffs.
If somebody's taking advantage of us, if our markets are open and they're not paying tariffs to get into this country, but yet we turn around and have to pay tariffs to get into their country, then something's wrong with that.
There's also a political calculation here with uncertainty over the impact of taking on a Republican president who's keeping a campaign pledge. Another reason why most expect Congress will ultimately cave. John?
Mike Emanuel tonight. Mike, thanks. Hundreds of steel workers in Illinois are very thankful tonight for the president's tariff plan. They are going back to work as demand for American-made steel is expected to rise. Correspondent Matt Finn reports tonight from Granite City, Illinois.
We're happy. The town has a buzz again.
Chris Bragg, a veteran and father of 3, is getting called back to work at U.S. Steel in Granite City, Illinois.
Bills, some people acquired, losing their houses, having to give back their vehicles.
Dan Simmons, the union president, says a longtime friend took his life after he was laid off and consumed by debt and worry.
This is sort of a second chance. I strongly believe that once they start us up, they're going to be sorry they ever shut us down.
Today's shockwave of hope pulsing through Granite City may be met with concern in other places where companies are taking advantage of low-cost steel. Economists and critics caution that while the tariffs might boost American steel, they could also increase the cost of production or cause trade wars.
We want everything to be reciprocal. And I think in the end, we're going to have a lot of great jobs. We're going to have a lot of great companies.
Some U.S. Steel employees return to work this week. It'll be a few months until the furnace is fully restored, and when it is, the union says more than 500 people will be back on the job here in Granite City. John?
Mike, thanks very much. Or Matt, rather. Thanks very much. Stocks were mixed to start the week. The Dow lost 157 points. The S&P 500 dropped 3.5. The NASDAQ gained 27.5, finishing at a record high. Are we getting closer to another vacancy on the Supreme Court? One senator seems to think so. That's coming up. A Republican senator facing a tough primary challenge this spring is reviving speculation into a possible vacancy on the Supreme Court in the near future. Does Senator Dean Heller have some inside information, or is this just a thinly veiled plea for support? Here's correspondent Doug McElway tonight.
Rumors of Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy's potential retirement reignited Friday when Nevada Republican Senator Dean Heller addressed a closed-door meeting in Las Vegas.
I think Kennedy's going to retire sometime early summer. That being the case, Republicans are going to have an opportunity now to put another Supreme Court justice in place.
Longtime court watchers dismissed Heller's comments, noting he does not serve on the Senate Judiciary Committee and does not personally know the media-shy Kennedy. In addition, Kennedy has already hired his clerks for the court's next session, and the High Court is one of the few places in Washington where secrets really are kept.
It's something that's really drilled into the new clerks as they start, that confidentiality is of utmost importance.
As they always say, those who talk don't know, and those who know don't talk. So at this point, it's really just all speculation.
Heller may have ulterior motives in feeding the Kennedy retirement rumor. He said he hopes a vacancy would inspire voters. He's in a tight primary race against perennial Nevada Republican candidate Danny Tarkanian.
It's a great issue for the conservative base. They're very fired up by the thought of getting another Supreme Court justice, perhaps like Justice Neil Gorsuch.
If there is a Supreme Court retirement, it may not necessarily be the 81-year-old Kennedy. Justice Stephen Breyer is 79, and Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg turns 85 on Friday.
It's very easy to imagine this president having multiple nominees to the Supreme Court, and that's, of course, one of the most long-lasting impacts any president has.
As speculation builds about the Supreme Court, the Trump administration is moving quickly to fill 17 lifetime vacancies on U.S. courts of appeal and another 121 district court vacancies. It is in those courts where 99% of the nation's federal court decisions are made. John?
Doug McElway for us tonight. Doug, thanks. Authorities in Northern California are still not saying why a former Army rifleman killed 3 female employees after a day-long siege at a veterans home on Friday. 36-year-old Albert Wong had been expelled from a treatment program at the facility in Yountville. He was found dead after the standoff. Police are not saying how he died. A New Hampshire woman who won a Powerball jackpot worth nearly $560 million can keep her identity private. A judge has ruled disclosing the woman's name would be an invasion of privacy. The winner signed her ticket after the January 6th drawing, but later learned from a lawyer that she could have shielded her identity by writing down the name of a trust instead. The woman's lawyers argued that her privacy interests outweigh what the state says is the public's right to know who won the money in the nation's 8th largest lottery jackpot. Britain's prime minister is moving closer tonight to an outright accusation against Russia over the poisoning of a former Russian spy on British soil. Correspondent Rich Edson has reaction tonight from the State Department.
We will not tolerate such a brazen attempt to murder innocent civilians on our soil.
British Prime Minister Theresa May says it is highly likely Russia is responsible for poisoning a former spy with military-grade nerve agent in southwestern England. Her government has summoned Russia's ambassador to the United Kingdom, Alexander Yakovenko, to explain by tomorrow whether his government either executed the attack or lost control of its nerve agent.
Should there be no credible response, we will conclude that this action amounts to an unlawful use of force by the Russian state against the United Kingdom.
May says it cannot be business as usual with Russia, and Britain would consider much more extensive measures than diplomatic expulsions or limited sanctions. Last week, Sergei Skripal and his daughter were found on a park bench, poisoned. They're in the hospital in critical, stable condition. The Russian government convicted Skripal of spying for the British, and in 2006 sent him to prison. In 2010, he arrived in the UK as part of a spy swap. This afternoon, a British reporter asked President Vladimir Putin whether he was behind Skripal's poisoning.
Get to the bottom of things there first, then we'll discuss this.
The Russian Foreign Ministry calls May's speech a circus show in the British Parliament, and the Kremlin spokesperson says Russia had nothing to do with the attack.
This Russian citizen worked for one of the British intelligence agencies. The incident took place on British territory, and therefore it has nothing to do with Russia, let alone the Russian leadership.
A State Department official says the United States will support its greatest ally, the UK. As for a U.S. retaliation against Russia for this, the official says the British government has not asked the United States to join its response. John?
Rich Edson at the State Department tonight. Rich, thanks. Up next, Washington Archbishop Donald Wuerl on the 5th anniversary of the election of Pope Francis. First, beyond our borders tonight, at least 50 people are dead in a plane crash in Nepal. Officials say the twin-propeller aircraft flying from Bangladesh swerved erratically and flew dangerously low before slamming into the ground at the airport in Kathmandu. Authorities say 16 survivors were taken to the hospital. Syrian state-run TV says a small group of civilians has left the rebel-held enclave of Ghouta through a corridor established by government forces. The area has been under bombardment by Syrian troops who are trying to defeat opposition fighters. The military claims it has effectively divided Ghouta into 3 parts. And Chinese President Xi Jinping has a lot more job security tonight than any other recent leader in Beijing, any really since Mao. Lawmakers have changed their constitution, eliminating presidential term limits and possibly paving the way for Xi to be president for life. Supporters hail the move for its stability benefits. Critics say it moves China closer to a return of the bloody excesses of past dictatorships. Just some of the other stories beyond our borders tonight. We'll be right back.